Have you ever wondered if a promise actually has a price? Well, today we're going to dive into a totally fascinating and, well, incredibly detailed system from the ancient world found right in the book of Leviticus that did exactly that. It's this wild intersection of personal promises, religious devotion, and, yep, cold, hard cash.
Look, we've all been there, right? You make this heartfelt promise, a vow, maybe in a moment of panic or just overwhelming gratitude. But what happens when life happens? Circumstances change, and you kind of need to take it back. Well, in ancient Israel, there was a way out, but it was going to cost you. So, for the ancient Israelites, certain sacred promises, these vows, could actually be undone. But it wasn't as simple as just saying, never mind. Nope, it involved a very specific and sometimes pretty surprising economic transaction. So, at the heart of all this was something called the special vow, a promise to dedicate something or, get this, even someone to God's service. But, that wasn't always practical for daily life. So the law provided an official way to redeem, or basically to buy back that vow. And this is where it gets truly wild. The whole system starts by putting a fixed monetary value on human beings. Now, let's be super clear. This wasn't about slavery. It was more of an abstract valuation, a way to calculate the tangible economic worth of the sacred promise itself. And check out this table. The valuation was incredibly systematic, all broken down by age and by gender. So a male in his prime, say between 20 and 60, was valued at 50 silver shekels. A female in that same age range was set at 30. And you can see how the values for little kids and for the elderly were lower, which probably reflects that society's view on economic potential. Let's just focus on that for a second. That difference, 50 shekels versus 30 shekels for adults in their prime, that's a really foundational piece of this system. It sets up this clear hierarchy in how these vows were valued, and it gives us this incredible window into the economic and social structures of the time. But this whole system wasn't completely rigid. It actually had a built-in safety net. If someone was just too poor to pay the standard rate, a priest could step in, assess what they could actually afford, and set a new, lower price. It's this really fascinating glimpse of a mechanism for social equity, embedded right there in the law.
Okay, so after setting up this whole system for valuing people, the law then expanded outward. It wasn't just about people. These rules applied to pretty much every part of a person's life, their livestock, their homes, and even the land they owned.
Now, the rules for animals were super specific. A clean animal, think of one suitable for sacrifice, like a sheep or an ox. Once you vowed it, that was it. It was considered holy. End of story. But an unclean animal, like a donkey, well, it couldn't be sacrificed, so it was handled differently. A priest would set its value, and then the owner had the option to buy it back. And the law was really, really strict about trying to game the system. Let's say you vowed a perfectly good sheep, but then you thought, maybe I'll swap it for this less valuable one. Bad idea. You'd be in for a surprise. Both the original animal and its crummy substitute would become permanently holy. No substitutions allowed. Period. And this same principle was applied to property. You could dedicate your house, and a priest would come and assess its condition, good or bad, to give it a monetary value. That value then became the starting point if you wanted to redeem the vow and get your house back. So if pretty much everything has a price, how do you actually buy it back? Well, that brings us to the core mechanic of the entire system, the redemption clause. It was a simple and amazingly consistent rule that governed almost every single one of these transactions.
Redemption in this world just meant settling your vow with money instead of the actual thing. You'd pay the price that was set, plus a little penalty for the trouble of taking back your promise.
And that penalty, it was always the same. You had to add 1/5 of the item's value, a 20% surcharge. This one number, it's basically the key that unlocks the entire buyback system. And this 20% rule was just applied across the board. Didn't matter if you were redeeming your house, an unclean animal, or even a tenth of your harvest, your tithe. You would always pay its assessed value plus that extra fifth. It created this really predictable and uniform legal framework. Okay, now things got even more complex when it came to land. Its value was uniquely tied to this massive 50-year economic and social reset button called the Year of Jubilee. This was a recurring event where all ancestral land was supposed to go back to its original family clan, which helped prevent permanent gaps between the rich and the poor. So the rules for land were really all about protecting family inheritance for generations. If you dedicated your own ancestral land, its value was calculated based on how many years were left until the next Jubilee. And yeah, you could buy it back with that usual 20% penalty. But if you dedicated land you had purchased from someone else, you couldn't redeem it. At the Jubilee, it would just go back to the original owner's family. So it sounds like you could buy back pretty much anything, right? Your house, your animals, even your family land. But were there any limits? Oh, you bet there were. There were certain things considered so fundamentally holy, they were completely outside this whole system of redemption. For these, there were no returns.
First, you couldn't redeem a firstborn clean animal, because under the law, it already belonged to God. You couldn't redeem that substituted animal we talked about either. And most seriously, anything or anyone designated as devoted, this special, irrevocable category called cherem, was considered so utterly and permanently holy, it could never, ever be bought back.
And this concept of cherem, well, it leads to the starkest, most severe statement in the entire text. A person who was devoted in this absolute sense could not be ransomed. The vow was final, irreversible, and absolute. So when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you realize this isn't just some random collection of rules. It is a deeply integrated system. It connects an individual's personal faith with a concrete legal and economic framework that really supported their entire society.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. What does it mean for society to create such a detailed price list for its promises to God? Does it make the sacred more manageable? Or does it risk reducing the divine to just another transaction? It's a fascinating look at where the spiritual and the practical collide.